How does a company go bankrupt? Not once, but twice. Get passed over by its biggest rival, and still somehow grow into a global empire. Well, today, we're diving deep into the incredible story of PepsiCo. It's a masterclass in survival, rivalry, and constant reinvention that all started with a simple pharmacist trying to solve an even simpler problem, an upset stomach. All right, so we're going to trace this amazing corporate survival story through 6 key chapters. We'll start at the very beginning with a Pharmacist digestive tonic, then see how it was saved by a Great Depression lifeline, twice as much for a nickel. Then we'll watch it spark the cola wars with the legendary Pepsi challenge, and then completely transform into a snack and soda empire. From there, we'll look at its modern strategy of winning with purpose. And finally, we'll look ahead to the next trillion-dollar bite. So let's set the scene. Our story doesn't begin in some fancy boardroom. Nope. It starts in a small-town pharmacy in New Bern, North Carolina. And it's all about a personal crisis for one man and later a single, incredibly risky bet that would give birth to a global icon. So back in 1893, there's this pharmacist named Caleb Bradham. He'd actually wanted to be a doctor but had to drop out of medical school when his family ran into money trouble. So he invents this little concoction called Brad's Drink, and he sells it as something to help with digestion. 5 years later, in 1898, he renames it Pepsi-Cola, which is a nod to the word dyspepsia, indigestion. The company officially forms in 1902, and for about 20 years, it's a classic American success story. Until 1923, when the whole thing just completely fell apart. So what happened? What brought this promising company to its knees? It was a single, catastrophic gamble. After World War I, Bradham was convinced that sugar prices, which had skyrocketed from 3 to 28 cents a pound, were gonna keep climbing. So he bought a massive supply right at the peak. And then, of course, the market crashed. That one decision completely wiped out 2 decades of success and forced the founder of Pepsi into bankruptcy. Okay, so from the ashes of bankruptcy, Pepsi is about to stage one of the most remarkable comebacks in business history. And it's all thanks to a brilliant Depression-era gambit. I mean, the company was so weak, it was about to vanish for good. And get this, in a moment of what has to be supreme irony, the bankrupt Pepsi company was offered for sale to Coca-Cola. But Coke's executives, they just didn't see it as a threat. They refused to even make a bid. They literally passed on the chance to eliminate their greatest future rival forever. So the new owner, a guy named Charles Guth, he pulls off this brilliant, incredibly simple move. At the time, Coca-Cola was selling its famous 6-ounce bottle for a nickel. So Guth starts selling Pepsi in 12-ounce bottles for the exact same price. And that was it. That was the perfect value proposition at the perfect time. Twice as much for a nickel. For a country struggling through the Great Depression, that was an irresistible offer. That simple idea, blasted across the country in the first ever coast-to-coast radio jingle, didn't just boost sales, it literally saved the company from extinction. So Pepsi had survived, but, just surviving isn't the same as winning. Now it was time to go on the attack, and that's what sparked one of the most famous rivalries in corporate history, the Cola Wars. And this brings up a classic business question, right? How does the perpetual underdog, the number 2, take on the undisputed king of the industry? Well, Pepsi's answer was both audacious and incredibly simple. Let the people decide. In 1975, they launched the Pepsi Challenge. They literally set up tables in shopping malls all over the country and asked people to do a blind taste test. Just taste both and pick the one you like better. The results were a shock to a lot of people. A clear majority of consumers actually preferred the taste of Pepsi. This campaign was a direct shot at Coke's superiority, and it forever changed how the public saw the two brands. And that just kicked the Cola Wars into high gear. It became a cultural phenomenon. Pepsi went all in, launching the Pepsi Generation ad campaign, targeting a younger, cooler audience. They signed massive, record-breaking endorsement deals with stars like Michael Jackson. The pressure was so intense that it actually forced Coca-Cola into one of the biggest marketing mistakes in history, the disastrous launch of New Coke in 1985. Pepsi had proved it was a serious contender. But here's the twist, and honestly, this might be the most important part of the story. Pepsi's biggest, most game-changing move wasn't about winning the Cola Wars. It was about changing the entire battlefield. Way back in 1965, years before the Pepsi Challenge even started, the company made its most visionary move. It merged with the snack food giant Frito-Lay, creating the modern PepsiCo.
It was a strategic marriage of salty snacks and sweet drinks. It was this recognition that, hey, the person buying a soda is probably also buying a bag of chips. This created a diversified powerhouse with a business model that its main rival, Coca-Cola, has never really been able to replicate. And they just kept building that empire. In 1997, they spun off their restaurants, KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, to get laser-focused on packaged goods. Then the buying spree started. They bought Tropicana in '98 to take over the juice market, and then in 2001 they merged with Quaker Oats, not really for the oatmeal, but for its crown jewel, Gatorade, the absolute king of sports drinks. Every single move built a stronger, more resilient company.
So that brings us to the modern era. The world is changing, and this corporate giant has to adapt, once again, to new consumer tastes and totally different priorities.
The company's big answer for this new world is something called Pep Plus, or PepsiCo Positive. Now look, it's easy to be cynical about corporate slogans, but this is being framed as a fundamental top-to-bottom transformation of the business. It's about putting sustainability and people right at the center of their growth strategy.
And this massive strategic shift is being driven right from the very top. This is the personal commitment of the current chairman and CEO, Ramon Laguarta. His signature is basically on the company's entire future direction.
So what does Pet Plus actually mean? Well, you can break it down into three main pillars. First, evolving their products to have less sugar, salt, and fat. Second, creating a more sustainable supply chain, everything from how they grow ingredients to recycling plastics. And third, a focus on empowering people, both in their workforce and in their communities. It's a direct response to what today's consumers are demanding. And so, here we are, at the future. After more than a century of gambles and pivots and comebacks, the stakes for PepsiCo have never, ever been higher. Just take a look at this number, $1.3 trillion. That is the estimated size of the global market for convenient foods and beverages. It is a massive prize, and the race to capture it is on. PepsiCo's strategy to win is pretty clear. They're not just a snack and soda company anymore. The goal is to evolve into a full-blown health and wellness platform. We're talking sports drinks, juices, healthier snack options. The whole company is betting its future on winning over the health-conscious consumer. And that leaves us with one final critical question. From a pharmacist's tonic to a global empire, PepsiCo has always been the challenger, the underdog that survived by making bold moves. Now, as the entire world pivots towards wellness, can this eternal challenger execute one last great gambit to truly own the future of food and drink?